average 401k balance by age.
It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Brian, I am super excited about this show because this is one we've kind of gotten into the rhythm of doing every year. And what's so great is that for most folks, when it comes to building their financial life, in most circumstances, the 401k account generally tends to be the single largest account that they house. So we probably ought to spend some time talking about it.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite traditions. We do an annual update show on 401ks. And Bo, if you think about what has happened just so far in 2021, but then even go further back to the pandemic of 2020, whoo, a lot of life for 401ks.
It was a lot.
I mean, think about this. I mean, we've got, first of all, volatility. I mean, we look at this graph. I mean, we fell off a cliff. We had full V-shaped recovery within just a few months. Jobs became not something that was just kind of a given.
That's
because
right.
we'd gotten to the point where we realized 401ks, 403bs, all these things, these are employer-provided plans. Well, in 2020, having a job was not necessarily something you just anticipated was, just part of the process. And then the last thing, the government, as part of the CARES Act, allowed penalty-free distribution. So I felt like we kind of opened it up. Now, look, there's a lot of people needed the money, but I just being the person that's always thinking about building financial independence, building wealth, I get nervous about too much access to retirement accounts because I see too many people when they change employers, they go buy the F-150 truck, they put a swimming pool in the backyard. I was worried we were going to have those type of things. So I think in today's show, we'll even be able to cover how big of an impact did 2020 have on 401ks.
Yeah, what I think is really remarkable is, obviously some folks really needed those CARES Act distributions. Some folks needed those change in rules. But it made us nervous because really retirement assets are, in fact, for retirement. And I was shocked by the statistics that in 2020, 1.6 million Americans inside of Fidelity 401k plans ended up taking early distributions under the CARES Act because that penalty was waived. That's about a little over 6% of all participants under the Fidelity umbrella. And for those of you that don't know, Fidelity is one of the largest 401k providers in the whole world. So 6% of their participant population, that's a big deal. That's a lot of folks.
And then I believe Daniel found this in his research, and I think this might have come from CNBC, that overall money out transactions from retirement plans was 12% higher in 2020 than it was in 2019.
So we could make the assessment that the legislation that happened, that changed, people did take advantage of it. It was something. So you're right. 2020 was just all in all a very, very unique year for 401k plans.
So let's look forward into we're now in 2021. Did anything change between contribution limits? Give us the overview, Bo.
Sure. So in 2021, there were a few adjustments for salary deferrals in 401k plans. Those actually stayed the same. If you are someone under 50, you can contribute as a salary deferral $19,500 into your 401k. If you're someone over 50 years old, there's still a $6,500 catch-up contribution. So your total salary deferral contribution can be $26,000. But what did change is there was an annual. So when you look at not the salary deferral, but the total pot of money that can go into your 401k, and that's across salary deferrals, as well as safe harbor employer matching contributions, as well as profit sharing. Those three buckets did increase in 2021 that you can have $58,000 for those under 50 go into your 401k, or if you're someone over 50, when you include the catch-up, it's $64,500. So we did get a little bit of an increase on the overall limits into 401k plans.
So that's kind of what the limits are for it. I always like to remind everybody how important are 401ks to wealth creation. Well, we do an annual wealth survey of our money guy clients that have actually gone through the abundance cycle and graduated to abound wealth.
Yep.
And when we do that annual wealth survey, here's what we found out is that you would think, how do people get their money? And I always share the stat that, 80% of millionaires are first generation, but I think it goes beyond that, is that the lion's share of them are actually savers and investors. They're not the virtuosos. That's only 5%. They're not entrepreneurs. That's 8%. They're not even just senior executives, which is just under 20% at 19. They're savers and investors at a level of 68%. This is the lion's share of millionaires are building their wealth primarily through saving and investing.
Exactly. And what I love is it's what's available to most of us. Most of us have access to some sort of 401k plan. And the folks who've actually had financial success have taken advantage of that. Again, almost 70% of our population, that's the way that they said they became wealthy, was by utilizing the vehicle that was available to them.
So now let's talk about just the stats of 401k, some 2021 statistics that have just recently been published. Where we are with this is 73% of employees have access to a defined contribution plan.
Well, I think the statistic is that 73% of employees with access to a 401k plan
actually participate.
To a defined contribution participate. So of all of the folks who can access a 401k, about 73% of those folks do actually participate in that employee plan.
Here's what's interesting, because we've been doing this show long enough now and there's this thing in the background that always makes me think of Aflac, but it's quacka. It's if you don't know what quacka, it's these auto enrollment provisions that Congress has passed, and they incentivize plans to do auto enrollment plans. And when I see that 73% participation rate, I think what threw me off on that is I know historically, and this always breaks my heart because it is, when we talk about there's a reason in the financial order of operations, step number 2 is get that free money with your employer match. I can't stand it when people don't maximize all that free money in their 401k, because when I give 401k enrollments, I always give the analogy, if I set up a table right outside this door, there's not a single one of you guys that would walk past if I was handing out $100 bills. Everybody in the room would make sure they stopped at that table to get their $100 bill. But yet, in 401k plans, the stats for non-auto enrollment are at 52% employee participation.
Right.
You add the quacka, or the auto enrollment feature, that number jumps up to 87% for plans that have auto enrollment built into their retirement plans.
It's remarkable how starkly different those are by folks who just, errors of omission, they don't do anything and they get auto enrolled. 87% of folks participate. So I think a big takeaway is if you are someone out there that is a small business owner, or you work in the HR department of your company, you may want to think about adding one of these automatic enrollment features, because it's a great way to get participation up to help people start building their army of dollar bills.
There was another stat. Now, I tried to cut this one. Bo wouldn't let me, so I'm going to let you explain. But we found out is that employment plans offer, and this is lower than it's been in the past, about 15.4 investment options.
Yeah, so obviously when you invest in a 401k plan, there's a list of options where you can choose what to invest in. We like talking about target retirement index funds and low-cost funds. Well, the average number of options available is 15. Well, not all plans are created equal. Some are really, really good, really robust, really low cost. Some are really non-diversified and super expensive. And if you're working through our financial order of operations, or if you've gone out to the website and you have our financial order of operation deliverables, this is one of the reasons people ask, well, should I do my Roth 401k or my Roth IRA? With a Roth IRA, you're not just limited to 15 investment options. So that's kind of a unique thing. As the number of investments change, it might change how you approach building up your 3 different tax buckets.
This last point, we had a little disagreement. Not disagreement, we just saw it a little differently, is that the combined contribution or savings rate for 401ks, both employer and employee, 13.5%.
And so I was encouraged by that. I was like, 13.5%, that's not too bad. That's double-digit saving. That's close to 15%, not quite there. That looks pretty good, but you had a different perspective on that.
Well, and not to be the bah humbug here, but when I see 13.5%, I know that's both employer and employee. I know probably the employer is 3 to 6%.
Sure.
I mean, they just are, but we'll just say it's 3 or 4% for just argument conversation in this. So that means the typical employee is somewhere around 8 to 9%. I know that we recommend 25% of your gross income needs to be savings for the future. Now, I know not all of that is going to be just in your 401k, because you're going to hopefully be doing your Roth IRAs and other savings accounts. But I just know 8% is about a third of the 25% of that number. And that's not good enough. I think we can all, I've always said, we don't have an income problem here in America. We have a savings/investment problem where people just don't let their army of dollar bills build. Because remember, here's the ultimate goal and the big secret to financial wealth and prosperity. You're trying to turn your working wages capital into investment capital. That's where the army of dollar bills came from. If your money can work harder for you than you do with your hands, your back, and your brains, you're going to be set up for success. That's what we call sleeping money. That's where your money is working while you're sleeping, while you're on vacation. That's the importance of saving in these employer plans.
And what we know is that as our life cycle changes, as we age, the way that we think about investing in our 401k plans and utilize them, and even our savings rate, has to adapt as well. So we thought one way to kind of work through this would be to talk about average 401k balance by age. We're going to talk about where, depending on what age you are, where the average is in this country, and then what your total savings should be. And then we're going to give you some pitfalls, some things to watch out for, some things to be aware of in each decade and age and stage of life.
So let's jump in with the 20-year-olds.
Okay.
Now, look, I'm a little bummed because I'm the Rodney Dangerfield of this content team. It's because I wanted to change this to a big bowl of piping hot spaghetti instead of don't blow your shot. I mean, I think that this ought to be don't miss Mom's spaghetti. And this is, of course, a reference to Eminem and 8 Mile. I mean, because you got to get in there. This is your chance. When you're in your 20s, guys, there is nothing but opportunity. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise, because I know there's a lot of voices out there, whether it's the financial media, whether it's friends or relatives that have gotten older and maybe the system hasn't worked for them, that are going to be telling you 20-year-olds, hey, don't live for today. Don't worry about tomorrow. And I'm telling you, this is your chance. This is your opportunity to take advantage. Don't miss it.
I learned this when I was in college. The most valuable money you will ever save in your entire life is the first money that you save. So if you can create a habit early on in your early 20s, when you first get that first job, when you first start thinking about the future, and you can get those soldiers going into your army of dollar bills, you will be amazed at what that can do for you. Again, if you haven't gone to the website, go to moneyguy.com/resources. We have an illustration out there called How Powerful Are Your Dollars that shows you, if you're a 20-year-old, every $1 that you can invest has the potential to turn into $88 by the time that you turn 65. But if you wait, that power begins to decrease. So don't blow your shot in your 20s when you have the maximum earning potential on your army of dollar bills.
So we've taken it a step further. We've actually calculated some numbers. I'll let you kind of start pulling these up on there because I think this will make our point even more so.
So the first thing I want to do is do sort of a survey of where we are. Like, where do we stand relative to our peers? Well, according to 401k data compiled by Fidelity, the average 401k balance for someone in their 20s is $15,000. That's the average 401k balance that they house. Well, the average contribution rate for someone in their 20s, now this is not employer included. This is just for salary deferral elections by employees. For someone in their 20s is about 7.5%. So, it's good. Remember, our goal is we want you to get to 20 to 25%. But this is someone just starting out. I'm happy to see that we have 7.5%, that we're at least moving in that direction.
Well, look, and I'm not going to go too hard on my early 20-somethings because we all graduated from either high school, college. We get out there in the workforce. It didn't all happen overnight. I mean, look, my goal coming out was save $100 a month.
Yep.
I mean, that was really what I was shooting for because I knew $100 a month when I was in my early 20s. Did it long enough, compounded it. It was going to be $1 million just off $100 a month. But I knew eventually it grew into even more of that was the goal. I know by the time you close out the decade of your 20s, according to Fidelity, with the largest 401k provider, you do want to at least have 1.2 times your income, hopefully by the time you reach age 30.
So it's a really good spot check. If you take your current income, multiply it by 1.2, do you have that much saved up in your liquid portfolio? But we wanted to take it even a step further because we think when you are starting out, when you're in your early 20s, it's really about your savings rate. How much should I be saving to live the life I want to live and move in the direction I want to move. And so we thought we'd do some numbers. We thought we'd put some math behind this.
Well, and I love this because I know what's coming. And we tell you need to be saving 20 to 25% of your gross income. 25% is to grow. The goal, I don't know why I said grow, but it is the goal to grow it.
It also is the grow.
But here's the thing that I think is always a lot of you guys, just like I talked about, you're in a struggle. You're brand new. You're freshly minted in the workforce. There is a battle for every dollar that comes from your paycheck. Is that going to rent? Is that going to student loans? Is that going to car payments? But here's the great news. A little goes a tremendously long way. And you're going to see that as we start showing you these stats, because here's what we've set up. We basically did a calculation where we were saying, if you just wanted to have a retirement lifestyle that had replaced 60% of your working wages, because let's face it, when you retire, you're not going to have as much in taxes.
Sure.
You're not going to have to save for retirement anymore. I sure hope you're debt-free at this point. So 60% of your gross income is going to probably serve you pretty well in retirement.
And then there's Social Security and other things that can help out with that.
So we did that. And we for this decade, we got the 20-year-olds, we got the 25-year-olds, and we got the 29-year-olds. And we wanted to replace 60%. This is what you should save. And then on the far right, we have, but if you save 20%, what would it produce? And here's what's amazing. Because your army of dollars are so powerful when you're 20 years of age, you only need to save 9% of your gross income to reach 60% of your working wages.
And so I'm encouraged by that because remember, we just said that the average person in their 20s saves about 7.5%, 7.4%. Well, if I have an employer match on top of that, maybe that's 3%. Great, we're hitting that number. If we're close to 10%, we're hitting that number for a 20-year-old. But you listening to the show are not the average 20-year-old. You're not the folks that are sitting on the sidelines. You are financial mutants. You're the ones that get it. If you save 20% of your income starting at age 20, and again, we just assumed a 1.5% wage growth rate. If you can save 20%, by the time you get to retirement, you will be able to replace 134% of your pre-retirement income, not your age 20 income, your pre-retirement income. When you retire, you actually get a pay raise. You get to spend more money. You get to live like no one else because you made the decisions to save for the future and get your army of dollar bills working.
But it's not just for 20-year-olds. I mean, because think about this. 25-year-olds, you're also in a powerful situation. 11% will replace 60%, and then you're still going to get a pay raise in retirement if you're just saving 20% of your gross income. That will probably get you a retirement that's 105% of your working wages.
If you're someone who waits, though, and you don't start earlier in your 20s, and you start from zero, starting at age 29 at the end of the decade, if you want to replace 60% of your pre-retirement income, you do need to save about 14%. So now we're getting closer to that 20 to 25% that we always talk about. But if you can save 20% starting at 29, you will be able to replace 86% of your pre-retirement income. And remember, you're not going to have taxes, you're not going to have savings, you're going to have other sources of income. That should get you pretty excited if you're in your 20s, beginning your journey of building financial independence.
So hopefully we've gotten you excited about saving in your 20s. We do want to kind of close out this decade with touching on a few pitfalls that they break my heart, and I just want to make sure you don't make this mistake because, as you've seen, every dollar is too valuable in your 20s. Don't blow your shot. Don't get mom spaghetti on your shirt right before you're about to go blow it all open. So here's what we have. Pitfalls to avoid. The first thing is not getting that free money. Remember, this is step 2 of our financial order of operations because most of your employers are offering a 50%, 100%. It's so it's either 50 cents on the dollar or a dollar for dollar match. Don't blow that 50% to 100% guaranteed rate of return.
And look, I know when you start out, we're all broke. We all start out that way, and you might think, "Oh man, well, to get the full match, I got to put in 5%. I can't do 5%. Start somewhere. Do 1%. Do 2%. Start somewhere because there is free money on the line, and as fast as you can, go out there and maximize that free money because it's insane to walk away from that rate of return.
The next one is don't outsmart yourself with this asset allocation. Look, guys, this is a unique time, and it's my 20-somethings that I'm specifically looking at. I mean, we've got Bitcoin, we've got
GameStop.
Reddit posts, that are telling you about GameStop. All this with your 401k might just seem so boring, so 2006 that you're just disregarding it because you want to focus on all this shiny stuff over here. Do not let it pass you that the lion's share of millionaires build that first $1 million within their employer retirement plan. So this is too powerful to get cute with the asset allocation. Focus on, index funds, index target retirement funds, where you basically choose the date that you want to retire. Let the money work for you. You do not have to outsmart yourself with the asset allocation.
When you are starting out on your wealth building journey, you will find that up until your assets reach a critical mass, a couple $100,000, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000, your savings rate is going to be exponentially more important than your rate of return. So your effort, your focus, your diligence should be focused on how do I improve my rate of savings, not my rate of return. For rate of return, set it and forget it. Use a target retirement index fund. Focus on how much you can be saving and how quickly you can build up that army of dollar bills.
And then I'll throw in one more honorable mention for 20-somethings. Guys, a lot of plans now are offering Roth, meaning tax-free growth opportunities. If you're in a low tax bracket, plus the fact that you're super young and you have decades of compounding growth, don't miss out on that opportunity to make a Roth election with your 401k.
All right, Brian. So we've talked about our 20s. We talked about the folks that are just starting out, beginning on the wealth building journey. Now let's talk about the 30s, because this is the decade that we call the messy middle. Life is starting to move really, really fast, and it's easy to take our eye off the ball of building financial independence. We have to make sure that even when we have all these different things pulling us in all these different directions, we remember saving is important, and our dollars still have juice, even in our 30s, that can have huge impacts later in life.
When I see this headline, it makes me think of the Ferris Bueller's quote, but it is one of those things where I just don't want you to get caught up, exactly what Bo said, into the messy middle, that you wake up 10, 15, 20 years in the future and you go, how did I miss out on all the opportunity of letting my army of dollar bills do all the hard work? So we do have some data points to share on how important your 30s are.
So first, let's do a little spot check, right? 401k balances in your 30s. According to Fidelity Investments, they surveyed all their 401k participants, and the average 401k balance for someone in their 30s is $50,800. So, it's better than the 20s. It's growing, so that's not bad. You can see kind of where you stand there. When we look at salary deferrals or participant contribution rates, the average for someone in their 30s is 8.3%. So it has improved from their 20-year-old counterparts, but we're still not at that 20 to 25%. Remember, that's our goal. We want to be saving 20 to 25% of our gross income. Our 30-year-olds are doing a little better, but they're not quite there yet. And then if you want kind of a spot check as you think about closing out the 30s decade, where should you be from an overall portfolio, overall saving standpoint? By the time you get to the end of your 30s decade, you want to have about 2.5 times your annual income saved up. So whatever you're making at age 39 or 40, multiply it by 2.5, and that is where your total portfolio should be, according to Fidelity Investments.
And I want to give a little context on this because we just finished the 20s, but I know we break these into highlight videos at some point. Realize when you come into your 30s, you're hoping you have 1.2 times your income. You close out your 30s at 2.6 times your income. So you're hoping that you come into the decade with probably 1 times your income, but you leave it with close to 3 times.
That's huge.
You've got to let your army of dollar bills build. And let's kind of talk about, let's put some numbers to this. If you're saving, if you're a 30-something and you're saving at least 15%, you can replace 60% of your working wages when you retire in the future. That's how powerful even your dollars are at 30. If you're a financial mutant and you're saving at least 20% of your gross income, you will actually replace 81% of your working wages when you retire.
Now, what I think is beautiful here, Brian, is remember, what we did is we took the wage for a 30-year-old and we grew it at about 1.5% per year. So we're not talking about age 30 wages. We're actually talking about wages when you get to retirement. Well, if you're someone who saves 20%, right, and you're saving, that means that right off the cuff, you're living off of less than 80% of what you make. And you also have taxes and that sort of thing built in. So even if you're a 30-year-old and you haven't done anything in your 20s decade, but you're just starting, but you can commit to saving 20% of your income, you will still get a pay raise when you get to retirement. You can set it up so that you actually get to spend more in retirement than you did pre-retirement.
That's a great point because of taxes and retirement savings. But it's a slippery slope because you're going to see as you get older, these numbers are increasing pretty rapidly. By the time you're 35 years of age, you need to be saving 19% of your gross income to replace 60% of your retirement. And you can see that flows right over to what we're showing with if you save 20%, it's going to replace 62%. So you can see how those numbers kind of correlate. And then fast forward to when you're 39 years of age. Now here we are, we're getting really close to that hyper saving status that you need to be saving 24% of your gross income to replace 60%. And then if you're saving 20%, you just waited until 39 to start the retirement saving process, you can expect to replace just right under 50% of your working wages.
So I hope as you're kind of watching this, as you're kind of following this journey, you're recognizing that the sooner you start, the easier it is, the less burden there is, the less difficult it is to build wealth. The longer you wait to begin the process, the harder it becomes. The more disciplined you have to be, the more diligent you have to be. So the sooner you can figure this out, the better you're going to set yourself up for the long term. But just like our 20-year-old counterparts, folks in their 30s have some pitfalls they want to avoid. There are some things that can happen. There are some opportunities that exist. And unfortunately, we saw a lot of these last year in 2020 that can potentially derail your wealth building journey.
Yeah, the first one we kind of talk about here is taking money out of your retirement plans. Remember, these are assets that are supposed to serve you in financial independence. They are supposed to work for you when you're no longer working. So imagine what happens to the compounding growth process when you take 401k loans or you change jobs and you just, instead of rolling the money over and letting the army of dollars continue to work, if you go and put a swimming pool in the backyard, you have just taken money from your retirement for the swimming pool and really jeopardize how secure you'll be in the future.
That's one of the most heartbreaking things that I see, Brian. Is someone will change jobs and they'll get a notice that says, hey, you have left, now you can do something with your old 401k. And without thinking, they say, oh, great, I've saved up $20,000. I'm just going to take that. I just got a big bonus. Oh, okay, yeah, there's going to be taxes and penalties, but I've got that money. That is awful, awful in terms of being a good general of your army of dollar bills. You cannot do that. So when you do leave a former employer, make sure you don't leave those accounts abandoned. Make sure you bring them with you and you don't cash them out. And make sure you don't let that 401k be a crutch that allows you to pay for your lifestyle when it should be paying for your retirement. Obviously, we said last year 401k loans are a thing where you can borrow money from your 401k. It takes dollars out of your army and puts them on the sidelines, and you have to pay it back, and you're paying interest on that loan, but it's not like you're making money. You're actually losing money because of the opportunity cost. You should not borrow, or I'd say steal, from your future self by taking 401k loans unless it is an absolute last resort.
Well, here's why I think these are siren songs, is that it sounds on the brochure so beneficial. It's like, look, I need money. Instead of taking debt from a bank or a credit card company, I'll go take it from my retirement account. And the good news is I'll just pay it back to myself. That's how this sounds great. What you don't recognize, though, is when you take that 401k loan, and let's just say it's $10,000. That $10,000 quit working for you.
That's right.
I mean, it's not only that you pulled the money out to kind of subsidize whatever's going on in your life. It's that $10,000 is no longer compounding and growing for you in the background, and that can have a multiplying effect in the long term for the decades as you approach retirement. And that's the part to pay attention to. And just to give you some perspective on this, we know from the research that 18% of participants are taking 401k loans. That's almost 1 in 5 are taking loans out of their 401ks, and I feel like a lot of that's probably to subsidize life, because I don't think 1 in 5 people are having annual emergencies. And by the way, this 18% stat was pre-COVID.
So it doesn't even include the CARES Act.
I get it, because last year was a unique year. It was a one-off year of some weird things going on. We all agree it was a weird, unique year. But pre-COVID, we still were close to 1 in 5 participants were taking loans on their 401ks. I don't like that. I think that's a failure for the long term.
The third pitfall that we noticed that a lot of folks in their 30s don't recognize is they don't think about Roth versus traditional. Now, remember, the difference in Roth and traditional is if you do a traditional 401k contribution, you get a tax deduction, a tax benefit when you put the money in. It grows tax deferred, and then when you go to pull that money out in retirement, you have to pay tax on it. The Roth is a little bit different. You put the money in, you do not get a current year tax benefit. It still grows tax-free, and then when you go to pull it out, you don't pay any taxes on it at all. So it's really this equation between, do I want to pay taxes now or do I want to pay taxes later? Well, for someone in their 30s, if you think about tax-free growth over 20, 30, maybe even 40 years, they should get really, really excited about that. However, the statistics tell us a different story.
Well, I think it's interesting because now we're up to 74% of 401ks offer Roth opportunities.
I mean, that's 3 and 4 have a Roth 401k option.
That's the majority. Lion's share offer Roth
that
now.
People take advantage of that.
So imagine our surprise when we find out that only 13% of participants are actually taking this option.
And we're going to tell you in a second sort of how to think about, should I do traditional or should I do Roth? I'm not thinking that only the 13% of participants fall into the camp that should do Roth. I'm thinking a lot more folks should be doing it, should not just be thinking about the tax you're paying this year, but think about the tax that you'll pay over your entire financial life.
I share all the time that it takes just a little to create a lot because you're investing just a little bit today's happiness for that great, big, beautiful tomorrow. I can tell you that it's even better with Roth is because not only can you be a millionaire in the future, what if I told you could be a tax-free millionaire by just taking advantage of this employer Roth option? But a lot of you guys, you're not math and tax experts. So you're saying, I need some guidance. Give me some perspective. So we have created kind of a slide to walk you through the decision-making process on traditional versus Roth within your employment plan.
So if you think about where your income falls, if your combined marginal tax rate, that's the tax rate that you pay on your next dollar of income, right? You add up your federal marginal rate and your state marginal rate if you live in a state that has income taxes. If it's less than 25% between those two, you should really consider Roth because you are in historically a low tax position. And odds are in the future, as you build wealth, when you get into retirement, you're likely going to be in a higher tax rate environment. So the Roth would be a better option. Now, on the converse, if your combined marginal tax rate is greater than 30%, so your federal rate plus your state tax rate is above 30%, that current year tax benefit is really, really, really valuable. You may want to consider traditional because the tax benefit is just a little too valuable to walk away from, and there might be chances later in life for you to convert some Roth dollars or come up with ways for Roth. If you live in between, if your combined tax rate is somewhere in the 25 to 30% range, it gets a little grayer.
Yeah, and I'll even add, because I know I'm fully expecting it, people will post it into the YouTube comments because they do it every time when we compare Roth to traditional. They say those are apples and oranges because think about Roths don't get a current year tax deduction, whereas with your traditional, you do. So if you put the same tax rate in, aren't you just one is oversaving, the other is undersaving. There's zero difference between these two. You're a sucker for falling prey to this whole Roth versus traditional thing. I see these comments and they kind of blow my mind because there's a lot more going on. And I know that they're just trying to show us how smart they are. Because here's what the assumptions we're trying to think about. Yes, it's true with Roth. In essence, you are contributing more because you are not getting a current year tax deduction. You're giving after tax. So every dollar you put in Roth is a little bit more than you'd have to give if you're doing traditional. So that's actually can be somewhat of a positive that's requiring you to save more. But here's the ultimate thing that's running under the surface of all these calculations. If you're in the highest of high tax rates, you're hoping, because we always know retirees vote. And what do politicians, I don't care if you're red, blue, purple, whatever, on your political party, they typically are scared of the senior citizen block, so they give all kind of incentives. Think about all the states that have income taxes, but somehow they're tax-free on Social Security. They're tax-free on retirement distributions. They're tax-free on pensions. They don't do that with your wages. Why is that? Have you ever asked yourself, why are they so tax-free on all these retirement distributions? It's because they know who votes in each state. So there's a lot of things that can go into this recipe, is that likely when you retire some point in the future, when you also are now a retiree, there's going to be somebody who's going to vote in a tax policy, or the tax policy will already be established this way, that your income taxes will be lower in retirement. Plus, think about this. When you're no longer working a job, you're now living off of your portfolio. Plus, if you've done it the money guy way, we talk about this all the time, the 3-bucket strategy, you can legally manipulate how much you're going to pay income taxes on, because you have multiple pots to pull off of. You got after-tax money, you got tax-deferred, that's all your employer match as well as your traditional contributions, and then you got tax-free, which is Roth. If you retire when you're 60, you got 12 years to kind of figure out how you want to manipulate your income and live off of this. You probably are going to be in a much lower tax bracket then than you are when you're working and earning your peak earning years. That's why we do make some assumptions. Now, look, if you're different and you know your income situation in retirement is going to put you in a much higher tax bracket than while you're working, then yeah, you have a different set of rules, a different set of assumptions, but that's not the majority of the people out there.
All right, Brian. So, okay, we've talked about the 20s and 30s. Let's call those the ages of opportunity. Well, now we're going to shift into the 40s, into the next decade, and I'm going to call this sort of the age of realization. This is that decade where it's time to either make it happen or you're going to jump on the, I think this is your word, jump on the bitter train.
It is my word, because it's always, I get so excited about all the opportunities for wealth creation out there, but it's always the people my age and older that are really telling the younger generation, systems stacked against you. And the reason is because I think this is the age of midlife crises. This is the age where you look around and you're like, I don't like my job. I don't like where I'm at. You know what? I'm going to go poison the well on the younger people. And it's because maybe life hasn't gone the way you had hoped it would. Now, I just want to encourage you. Look, I'm trying to turn frowns upside down. So I'm hoping that this is a moment of celebration in your 40s because you're a financial mutant. But I know we're out there for everybody to see. And I'm still hopeful because when we do our millionaire survey of all of our clients, we have 40 and 50-year-olds that come into us. Maybe they started a venture. Maybe they started the investment process and they made enough income that they were able to save. You can still create opportunity and success for yourself even in your 40s. But this is the stage where it either is starting to come together and gel, because it was in my 40s that I felt probably comfortable for the first time. I was out of the messy middles. Or this is the time that you kind of have that midlife, oh no, it's not going well. And that we want to help you through whatever scenario you're in. We're going to give you guidance on how to move forward.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about a spot check, okay? When we look at the average balance of a 401k for folks in their 40s, again, this is data compiled by Fidelity. The average 401k balance for a Fidelity participant is about $121,000. So we've now gotten into six-figure land.
Well, now, but here's something, just to dissect this.
Okay.
We covered, when we were covering 30s, we said by the time you enter into your 40s, you want to have close to 3 times your income as you approach 40. Here we are seeing that the average for the entire decade of your 40s is 120. I mean, if you divide that by 3, that's $40,000 a year. I think that that's not where income is. I think people are actually behind. That's not reflective of 3 times their income.
Well, and that makes sense, Brian, because when you look at the average savings rate for someone in their 40s, it's only 8.9%. And again, I don't want to downplay someone who's saving 9%, but that's not the 20 to 25 that we talk about. If you want to have a meaningful change, if you want to be a financial mutant, there's a chance, unless you start really early on, back at 20 years old, just saving 9% of your pay is not going to get you there. It's not going to get the job done.
Yeah, and then also don't forget, because I always want to give you a goalpost to kind of set for where you should close out the decade at. As you approach 50, I want you to have close to 5 times your income. That's what Fidelity is recommending according to their research. You're hopefully leaving this decade with close to 5 times your income.
And hopefully you're getting excited about the wealth building journey at this point. Remember, when you left your 20s, it was 1.2 times your income. And then when you left your 30s, it was like 2.5 to 3 times. And now we're at 5. So it's almost like it's doubling or close to doubling every decade. Now you should start to be seeing, if you've done it right, if things are starting to gel, you should begin thinking like, okay, this thing is attainable. This vision that I've been dreaming about, this work that I've been doing is starting to pay off. I'm starting to see it begin to take shape.
So let's put some numbers to this. We know that what is probably an acceptable, a good retirement is if you can replace 60% of your working wages when you retire. How much would you have to save at both 40, 45, and 49? Here's what we came up with. Now, this is assuming you started at zero at each of these ages.
Yep.
You can see if you come into your 40 years of age, if you save 26% of your gross income, you're going to be able to replace about 60% of your retirement income.
Now, here's what I'll say to that. If you have waited till 40, if you have just kind of done whatever and you're sitting at zero at 40, you got to get busy.
Yeah.
You got to get to work. You have no time to waste because our goal is always 20 to 25% saving. Well, if you wait till 40, you got to be at the top end of that. You got to be at 26% to replace 60% of your pre-retirement income. There's no time to waste.
So let's fast forward to 45. Look at this. This is, guys, it's important. You can still do it. The FIRE people have shown you this. There's all kind of 20, 30, 35-year-olds. They're saving 40, 50% of their gross income. You too, if you're just now starting, you're watching this show and you're 45 years of age, you need to be saving 36% of your gross income to have that retirement that provides about 60% of your working wages.
And then if you wait until you're 49, wait until the end of your 40s, you have to save almost half, 48% of your income to be able to retire on 60% of your pre-retirement income. I think this is so interesting, Brian, because I've heard you say this over and over and over again. When it comes to investing, when it comes to building wealth, time can either be your biggest ally or it can be your biggest adversary.
That's exactly right.
Those are the two options. If you figure it out early, if you figure out how to start getting your army of dollar bills working, it can be a huge ally, and it can be the wind in your sails taking you to financial abundance. But as you see here, if you wait and you allow your time to constrict, it can be a huge adversary where the climb to overcome that mountain becomes extremely, extremely difficult.
So let's talk about the pitfalls, because, I mean, this is important because this is a crucial time here. I see it, people leaving soldiers behind. Mm-hmm. And that could also include abandoning accounts after you change jobs.
Yeah, we see this all the time. Someone will come to us and there'll be a potential client, a prospect who talks to us, and we'll ask them, okay, what kind of accounts do you have? Send us your statements. And we'll look through it, and it's basically like almost a biography of all the different places. It's like this patchwork quilt of all the different places that they've been. It's amazing how often people just forget about that. Oh, that's from a job that I had in my 20s, and that's from... If you really want your soldiers to be as efficient and effective as possible, you can't ignore them. You can't leave them behind. You need to have a strategy that encompasses all of them. So go get those old accounts and either know where they are or roll them into your current 401k. Roll them into an IRA. Don't leave your soldiers behind or they're not going to be nearly as effective for you as they can be.
Well, I also think this is the age where you're in your 40s, you're starting to hit your peak earning years. And I worry about people not maxing out. And let me talk about this. I mentioned when I was, 18 to 20, I was just trying to save $100 a month, but then I reached another goal. I remember in my late 20s, started saving over $1,000 a month. And I was so proud of myself because I was building that army of dollar bills. But what if I'd have stopped?
Yeah.
I mean, and I see this all the time, is that we have celebrations, we have moments of success when we're in our 20s and 30s where we understand deferred gratification. But the problem is we got 8 pay raises since then. Our income is substantially greater. Now, if you look at our gross savings compared to our income, we're saving 8 or 9%.
Anemic, yeah.
We're not saving 20 to 25%, which is necessary. That's a problem, guys. That's why we talk about in the financial order of operations 6, you've got to be maxing out those retirement accounts.
If you're not working through the FOO, if you're not getting to those later stages of the FOO, you probably need to do a self-assessment and say, okay, why am I not there? What do I need to change to get there? If you want the free deliverable, go to the website, moneyguide.com/resource. You can see all 9 steps, figure out where you are, figure out how you get to the next step. We want you to take it, use it, and allow you to take your finances to the next level.
Let's talk about something I'm quickly approaching.
Okay.
50s and beyond. This is, I'm hoping this is a point of celebration for you because you're a wise field general. There's not a dollar that's in your army that you haven't, counseled well, and you put them into very efficient places so they can be maximized. They're not locked into, just sitting in the bank account, not doing what they're supposed to. But I'm also worried that this could be a cautionary tale. There's a lot of people that they're at this stage starting to look back and going, man, if I'd have just known about this then, I could have done it differently.
If you want to kind of give yourself an assessment, if you want to do a litmus test of how you stand up to next to your peers, according to data compiled by Fidelity, the average 401k for someone in their 50s in this country is about $204,000, right? So now this is someone who's approaching retirement, approaching financial independence, getting that stage of life. They've got saved about $204,000.
Now look, I'm interrupting again because I did this last time. I still don't think that's enough because I told we as we did the 40s, we know as you approach your 50s, you're supposed to be approaching close to 5 times your working income. If you take $203,000 divided by 5, that's a little over $40,000. These 50-somethings are making more than $40,000. It's not an income issue. We have a savings and a building of assets problem. That's not good.
Now, another thing that we see in this data is that the average contribution rate for someone in their 50s is about 10.5%. Now, I think what that means is folks in their 50s have not taken seriously that, oh man, I need to be saving 20 to 25%. But I want to flip this around, Brian, because you say something all the time. When you and your wife were early on in your wealth building journey, you told her, you said, hey, if we can just go pedal to the metal in our 20s and 30s, and we can save aggressively and get our army of dollar bills built up, by the time we get to our 40s and 50s, we can take our foot off the pedal. We can slow down. We can save a little bit less. I would like to think that the reason the savings rate for people in their 50s is 10% is because they have reached that stage where they could take the foot off the pedal. But I don't think, judging by that average 401k balance, I don't think that's the case.
Well, I think you have to flip the coin over. I think what actually happens, and we see this when you're talking to people just out in the general public, is that they realize the mortality is there and they're only 10, 15 years from retirement. And they're like, there's a reason this decade's savings rate is higher than 20-somethings, 30-somethings, and 40-somethings. I think that people start panicking, and you do see that contribution rate tick up. But you're right. If you do this right, and you're a wise field general, there's potential. You've already reached some level of success, and that's why I say it's a moment of celebration. But for, I think, the vast majority, the non-financial mutants, it is a little scary.
Now, in your 50s, you can see the landing, right? You may be entering into retirement in your 50s, or certainly you're thinking about it in your 60s. Your landing gear is down. So if you want to know, okay, where should I be? Where should my total portfolio value be? According to Fidelity, you should have about 8.1 times your annual income saved by the end of your 50s. By the time you get to age 60, you should have a little over 8 times your income saved, according to Fidelity.
Yeah, and I'll take it a step further. By the time you're 65, it should be close to 10 times your income. So pay attention to those numbers, because this is when you are bringing it in for a landing, you need to be paying attention. Now, I've given a lot of cold water on this, but I still think that there's opportunities even for latecomers. Because when we pull up the stats for where a 50-year-old, if you save 52%. Now, I know that's crazy. That is because we got taxes. But there are fire people. There are 20-somethings, there are 30-somethings that are showing you this can be done. Even a 50-year-old starting from scratch, this is incredible to me to think about that you save 52%. You still have a chance to retire in 15 short years and let your army of dollar bills give you a retirement that's 60% of your working income.
Now, I think the 50 is probably the last step on that, right? Because if you wait until you're 55 to start, if you're at 0 going into 55, you'd have to save 85% of your earned income to be able to retire at 60% of your pre-retirement income by 65. I think realistically, what you probably have to do is if you're waiting until 55 to start, you have to have some real conversations with yourself around, is 65 actually my retirement number? Or do I need to work a little bit longer? Do I need to bridge the gap until I can start drawing Social Security? How can I begin to reformat my plan to actually have a plan in place?
Or definitely expand out the working career. I mean, you're probably going 70, 75. Good news is technology, healthcare expanding. Sure. I think there's always an opportunity to find goodness, an opportunity to move forward. Just you gotta make it happen. So let's talk about the pitfalls. This is a big one as we're getting to the point of that you are approaching financial independence if you've done this right. You kind of need to understand distribution rules and asset allocation because you probably are at this point. Tax location means something to you.
Big deal, yep.
I mean, we love index target retirement funds, but at this point, maybe you're charitably minded. Maybe you want to be able to, tax loss those and harvest those losses, but you also want to get smart with, hey, we want to put really growing assets in our Roth accounts since they grow tax-free. We want to put our liquid assets as well as our capital gains and dividend assets in the after-tax. And we want to put our ordinary income-generating assets in those tax-deferred buckets because that's going to be the most tax-efficient thing. That's important to understand at this age.
And you probably also do want to understand your distribution rules. When can you actually get access to your money? It's heartbreaking when we see someone says, hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to retire early, and I'm going to retire when I'm 54. And we're like, you're so close to that age 55 that if you retire at 55, you can get access to your 401k dollars, and you can't do that at 54. And if you don't have any 401k dollars, you can't actually get to your IRA assets until 59 and a half. You have to make sure you understand your pots of money. And just because you know what you are retiring to and you know what you're escaping from, you also have to know how you're going to pay the bills. Where are your dollars going to come from and which ones of your dollars are locked up and difficult to get to if you're someone who's exiting the workforce in your 50s.
And then we kind of closed it out with, and this is an important one, not minimizing risk as you reach retirement.
Sure.
Now, here's what we mean by this, because on the previous slide, we showed you the biggest savings group out of 20 all the way through 50 plus was the 50 plus group. And I think that's because in a lot of cases, there's a big uh-oh. I mean, you realize your mortality, you realize that retirement's coming, and you're like, man, I better get serious with this. There's also this desire that I need every dollar to earn as much as possible. And Fidelity, according to their research, found out that baby boomers are the most likely generation to be too aggressively invested.
So the generation that probably should be taking risk off the table is the one most likely to be over allocated to risk assets.
And that's a scary thing because I get it. There's some desperation in that decision that I'm going to be way aggressive because, man, if they'd let me buy Bitcoin in my 401k, I think there's unfortunately a lot of baby boomers that would say, I'm willing to roll the dice at this point because I got to make up for a lot of years that I didn't understand this whole concept of army of dollar bills and wealth multiplier. That's not where you want to be. So be very mindful that as you get older, it's not only the risk tolerance that you can handle emotionally, it's also what's called risk capacity, meaning that you might not have the years to wait for a market recovery. And let me give you some math exercises on this. If the market loses 50%, how much do you have to make to get your money back?
It's more than 50%.
It's 100%. That's a cool thing about math, or a cool little magic trick you can play, because if you lose 10%, you only have to make back 11% to get your money back. You can quickly see why diversification, asset allocation, because you can probably make 11% back within a year and a half. It's going to take you to get 100% return.
A long
It might
time.
take 7 years. It might take a decade. And if you're a person in your 50s and your 60s, that's time that you don't want to be waiting for your money to get back to break even to get back to work for you. So be mindful of where you are with your asset allocation.
For those of us who have access to 401k accounts, to employer-sponsored retirement accounts, they can be tremendous wealth building tools, whether it be because of the free employer money that our employer puts in, or whether it be because I get a tax benefit from putting in pre-tax contributions, or I get a tax-free benefit from doing Roth contributions. Make sure you're not squandering this opportunity to utilize a 401k to be a huge tool in your tool belt of building long-term financial wealth.
I know there's a lot of financial mutants out there, and you have crossed into 7-figure status by just being good at letting your army of dollar bills work through saving, through investing. And you're probably getting to the point where I've often said, this is why the abundance cycle is self-fulfilling and I can just give away so much free information. I know a lot of you guys are great do-it-yourselfers, and it's easy when life is simple. But the more successful you are, the more complicated the decisions become. Plus, you're also now the CEO of a 7-figure business. If you think about it, if you look at your retirement plans, you look at all the assets you've saved, you are now the CEO of a 7-figure business. That's some decisions. You don't know what you don't know, and you also worry about legacy. You worry about, am I taking on too much risk? This all gets to be, even I don't care how good you are, you're probably going to want a co-pilot, and that's why I know Complexity will find the successful people out there so we can give it away. You can come learn, apply, grow the concepts we're teaching you, but when you reach that level of success and you go, you know what, I need to get somebody in here, that's where the abundance cycle pays off. The cycle completes itself because you take the relationship to the next level because you remember who planted those seeds. We thank you so much. Remember, go to moneyguy.com/resources. We have, this is just one of the free resources. We have just pages of free downloads you can check out. Also know we just had a brand new relaunch of the Financial Order of Operations. It was extremely successful the first time, but Bo and I, being who we are, we're perfectionists on making sure that this abundance cycle keeps accelerating people's success so they can graduate through that cycle even faster. That we watch the videos we created in the first Financial Order of Operations. We say, you know what, this was good, but we can do even better, especially from some of the feedback. We have doubled the content in the Financial Order of Operations. So go check that out. You can go to visitlearn.moneyguy.com and look at the full Financial Order of Operations course and accelerate that abundance cycle even faster.
We are going to keep the content coming. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. We love you guys.
Hey, thank you. We couldn't do any of this without your support. I'm Brian Preston, Mr. Bo Hansen, Money Guy team, out.